If you go to the left, to the yellow, to the south, you're in desert. No one lives there. But the real fun and games, and the reason why the Russians drink so much, is the beige on the shoulders. Territories that even by the Russian definition are completely economically useless, but you could still shove a panzer division through that because it's flat. Russia has been invaded 50-odd times in its history, and every time a foreigner has made it to the green, the Russians have never driven them back. The weather has. Because the Russians can't move in their own space, but any foe who manages to get there clearly can cross distances at speed. So the only way the Russians have ever discovered that they can survive in their own neighborhood is to expand out of the green through the beige until they reach a series of geographic barriers that you can't run a Mongol horde through. And then they forward position their very, very slow-moving troops in the footprints between those barriers. Plug the gaps. During the Soviet period, the Russians controlled every single one of those plugs. Post-Soviet Russia only controlled one. And everything that Vladimir Putin has done in foreign affairs since 1999 has been about repositioning that forward defensive perimeter. This is the Karabakh War, the Kazakh intervention, the Donbass War, the Crimea War, the Georgian War. He's about halfway done. The question has never been...
All right, was there...
So,
yeah.
I was going to say, go back to the properly oriented map.
All right. So let's get that up here. There we go.
Okay. So he's referring to the blue areas, the blue arrows, I should say, as the areas where Russia is historically invulnerable to external attack. Except some of the areas that he's talking about really, A, aren't where they are, or B, don't exist at all. So let's start from the top and work around in a counterclockwise fashion. He talks about the one up there by Finland, the White Sea arrow. Historically, that's been used precisely once and nothing happened with it. And it was used precisely once because that was during the Russian Civil War, and the pro-Tsarist anti-Bolshevik faction invited a small contingent of Western troops to come in and protect ports that had been used to supply Russia with war materials up in the far north. So I don't think that one actually counts as a valid threat axis. The next one, which is the Baltic Sea axis, there hasn't ever been a Baltic Sea, cross-Baltic Sea attack. They either come down out of Finland or they come up northwards out of Poland towards St. Petersburg. So that arrow really is confusing when you look at it. The next one is the Polish Gap. This is the single most threatening approach route into Russia. And it's because it literally drives straight through the heartland, that green portion just above the Pripyat marshes, straight towards Russia or straight up towards St. Petersburg. That's the one they've always been most concerned with. The next one is the one that you see called Bessarabian Gap.
Let me interrupt real quick. That's also the one they can do the least about. So even if they can go through Ukraine, plug the other twos, plug the... unless they want to fight NATO, which I don't think they want to... I mean, I'm not being sarcastic here. I genuinely don't think that's on their agenda. I don't see how they close that one. So that does seem to me like it might make some of these points moot.
Exactly. What you're saying is exactly the point, which is the single most threatening axis of advance from their mortal enemy, which is the West, is actually the one they can't defend against. So the whole goal has always been, we've got to occupy Poland to prevent other people from using Poland to attack us. That's why every war seems to go back and forth across Poland multiple times, because Poland is what the Russians think they need to defend themselves, and anybody who wants to attack the Russians has to go through Poland. The next one is the Bessarabian Gap coming up out of Romania into Ukraine. There's a big river there, the Danube, among others. It's really tough to get across there, and once you do, then you're into Ukraine. And that, again, is pretty wide open, flat country that you can just advance across without too much problem. So that one needs to be considered. Separating the Bessarabian and the Polish gaps, that's the Carpathian and Transylvanian Alps in there. And you can't really fight across that. So those become two very distinct and separate routes of advance. The arrow going into the Crimea, I don't understand why that's there. The only time that's really been used is the famous Crimean War in the 1850s, and it took 2 years of fighting for the combined British, French, Sardinian, and Ottoman forces at great cost to take one city. So, and as you look at the map, there's only one way out of Crimea, and it's a very, very narrow land bridge. So it's fairly easy to defend against that. That's not a route of attack into the Russian heartland. I don't know why it's there. Okay. The one coming up the Black Sea coast, the one coming up the Caspian coast, those aren't either, because you're in mountainous areas coming through those. There isn't really a safe, easy access point to get through. So that's the one the Russians pretty much control and can block right now. The one that isn't shown on the map is somewhat to the east, and that's the one coming out of Afghanistan. I can't think of a single historical instance where somebody attacked Russia through Afghanistan.
All right, so in your view, basically it sounds like he may have a point about there are access points, but there's probably fewer than half of what they're talking about that's a concern, and one of them is probably a huge concern, but there's, practically speaking, there appears to be nothing they can do about it. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, the two biggest threats, if you want to look at it from the standpoint of a Russian imperialist who wants to defend Holy Mother Russia, the two biggest threats are the one coming from Romania and the one coming from Poland. And they can't do a damn thing about those because they're already NATO partners. If you attack them, then all of Western Europe gets on your case. It makes no sense to have gone for a military solution when the only safe, intelligent approach would have been a diplomatic solution.